One of the things I wanted to begin with when we talk about the issue regarding the border family crisis is
Keep our
that,
families together.
I'm sorry?
I said keep our families together.
Absolutely. They need to actually keep our families together. And actually, what's interesting about the policy is that they are, trying to address the whole issue of someone entering the border or coming to the border as an illegal entry. And what they've done is, I think, it's kind of like one of those uh, technical legal arguments that they're making in order to justify what they're doing. Uh, Basically, the policy has always been that when someone comes to the border seeking whatever entry, whether it's asylum or whatever it is, or withholding, or whatever the issues are, typically those individuals are at some point in time provided some sort of interview to determine whether their claims are reasonable, and then they're allowed to enter into the United States and pursue their claims. However, what they have done is they have immediately tried to implement some sort of so-called zero tolerance policy, where they're treating everyone who's coming to the border as someone who is committing a criminal act, detaining these individuals and taking their children away from them, regardless of what the circumstances are, which is a goes completely away from what we've been doing in the policies before. So I really don't, although we talk about whether there's a legal analysis of what they're doing, there is no legal justification for them to actually automatically assume that someone comes to the border is actually coming to commit some sort of criminal offense. In fact, in the past, the only time that entering the United States had been considered to be an illegal offense is when someone has actually been removed from the United States through deportation proceedings and attempts to come back into the country illegally at that point. So it seems to me that basically the motive really isn't to, in some way, develop some sort of zero tolerance policy for people who are coming to the United States as a criminal offense. Obviously, there's some sort of ulterior motive with regards to what they're doing. So I just kind of want to see if you can kind of chime in a little bit about your take on what the administration is doing with regards to separating these children from their families.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. And my take, whether they have a legal ground or not, this is more of a moral issue that's affecting those trying to enter the country. Because my mother is an immigrant from South America, and her intentions of coming to this country was basically to seek health, security, and protection. The same principles that the United States advertise all over the world, saying that this is what we provide to those who come here. So when you have our folks from Mexico or whatever country they're coming from, they're coming on the grounds of what America has advertised all over the world and made itself known. And then when they reach these gates or these shores, to be rejected and humiliated, and then on top of that have their children separated for them, totally counteracts that advertisement of health, security, protection, and in the pursuit of happiness. So right now you are seeing a small group of people who are in fear of their existence and trying to put over what you call a utilitarian move and to keep their control. So it's really unfair what's happening to our brothers and sisters at the borders and those who are being held at the gate. And it's really, this is what's motivating the protest.
Right.
Because this is more of a moral issue, if anything.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think that what happens is that, and this is the irony. The irony is that those people who have been practitioners legally as well as, in all aspects of immigrants' rights, this has never happened before. I mean, so obviously there is no reason for it. There is really no legal justification. And again, I think you're right. I think that becomes an issue of morality. It's a moral issue. I think that one of the things that we spoke about last week, and I think that it really is important to what we're talking about today, is that oftentimes these individuals, and again, I'm not going to sit here and bash the United States, but however, I am going to represent the reality, and the reality of it is that many of the individuals who are coming to this country are coming from countries that we have actually been personally involved in their politics. In other words, we were all over Latin America historically, trying to in Latin America's business. So once you enter into somebody else's business, then I think that it's also immoral to create chaos in some of these places, and then you're going to back up, and then you're going to complain about individuals who are coming to this country, when in many cases I believe that we've actually been involved or been responsible for some of the crises that are happening in some of these countries as well.
I totally understand that. And though we haven't seen this in this form, separating children from their parents is a long time consequence that's been happening in urban communities, especially when it comes to the war on drugs or anything of that nature. We have had our children separated from us, and what is known now as the foster system. We have many children that's been separated from their parents through the war on drugs and other fallacies that's happened to the African American community,
Right.
as well as Latino community.
Right. And there is no reason, obviously, for that. I mean, what you're doing is you're creating another crisis. And, obviously you have those who believe that it's intentional because it's like a systematic issue with certain communities, especially underrepresented communities and communities that are minority communities, both immigrant and domestic, where it has been this constant issue of trying to have an impact on those families that actually may have have a threat to, maybe, for the lack of a better term, status quo.
As an African American Muslim, we're told in the speech of God that we should not divide kith from kin or separate mother from child. That paradise is at the footstep of the mother. So that right there symbolizes the value in family, but unfortunately, this group of politicians who are pushing this separation are in fear of diversity in this country, because, as you know, the powers are changing ranks. You have more women that are starting to win these seats. You have more people of color that are starting to get into Democratic seats, and this is really a fear of diversity that America has so much promoted. Statue of Liberty, what they call it, the pot of I forgot what they called it, but this is the pot of humanity. But it's basically what you see is trying to counteract diversity and coming into power to promote a positive social welfare for everybody.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, especially in light of what's actually been happening. You brought up a really good point. And one of the things that I've always stated, especially in recent times, is that, the immigrant family is probably one of the biggest threats to our way of life. Or when I say our way of life, but the power or the so-called status quo's way of life, from the perspective that the demographics of this country, especially the voting demographics of this country, has changed so significantly over the past 12 to 16 years, that you're beginning to start seeing individuals that you would normally not see get into win national elections. It's changing, and I say that because I think that the Barack Obama and his win nationally, I don't think that people truly understood the significance of him winning that election. I was looking at one poll, and I can't remember what poll it is, and I've never really confirmed the numbers. However, the poll that I saw predicted that 80% of the Hispanic population and 70-something% of the Asian population voted for Barack Obama. And that had a significant impact on him becoming president of the United States. I don't believe it is any accident that Donald Trump's platform basically was based primarily on the fact that he was going to take a strong stance on immigration. And when you talk about the whole issue of we're going to take our country back, I believe that people truly didn't understand what he meant as far as the immigration aspects. I mean, you can go to places in the South, and I was born and raised in the South, where you would never see an immigrant. When I grew up, until I was probably 18 years old and went into the military, there was really no immigrant community. However, I went home probably about 5 or 6 years ago. That's completely changed. All across this country, you're starting to see a very large immigrant population across the country, and obviously their children are becoming citizens of the country once they're born in this country. So are you beginning to start, it's so symbolic of the fact that you're going to imprison their parents and you're going to indoctrinate their children. I mean, is that really what we're seeing going on? I mean, and I know that's a very harsh way of putting it, but sometimes, you get that idea.
I mean, I don't feel that the immigrant population is a threat to our existence. I don't feel that that this increase of people of color coming into position or into power is a threat, because down here in the grassroots community, we work and live together anyway.
Right.
So, and then what we've seen here in America is a natural birth of the land and who it naturally belongs to. Of course, the people who are naturally born, who this land naturally belongs to, they're going to flourish.
Right.
That's just cosmic law.
Mm-hmm.
So to say that that immigrants hold a threat, we just got to get to work and not let the system gentrify us, and find ways to bridge our cultures to one another so we could sustain our livelihoods. Because whether it's Latinos or Africans coming from across the waters, or even South Asians, we all understand under one principle that God created creation.
Right.
And the best of us are here to get to know one another. And those who choose not to embrace diversity, then they're going to live within their own bubble, within their own fears, because they're so used to being in control. And, let them be like that, because at the end of the day, whatever the Creator wants is going to happen.
Absolutely. So, and I agree. I don't believe that it's truly a threat to most of us. I mean, most of us who are basically, more concerned about the rights of human beings, period. I think that those who are, and sometimes it is a matter of perception. And I think that
honestly, it becomes a threat when you have a people who have lost their sense for survival and is stuck in the world of apathy and self-helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a group of people who have that's been entitled for so many years and just been having privilege and been in their way, they got used to things. But when globalization hit, it now opened the doors to smaller countries with bigger GDPs that the United States did business with, and they opened the doors to come over here. So right now, it's all about self-determination. Get yours, establish weight with justice, and fall not short in the balance. Because right now we're seeing a definitely change in world cultures, especially with the new technologies that's coming in. If not, they're just trying to use the integration as a front to disguise what's really about to happen as far as less jobs for humans and more jobs for AI.
Right.
You know, one of the things that I'm still trying to, I guess, trying to figure out whether or not, you
Who's this
know,
talking?
This is Bilal.
oh, this is Bilal.
That's not right.
Yes, what I'm trying to figure out is, what was the whole purpose behind, separating the child, from the parent, in terms of was it a deterrent for other people who would actually come along and try to do the same thing, or, I mean, what was the ulterior motive behind separating? That's what I just can't understand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously there's an ulterior motive. I mean, I think that this is what they're saying. I mean, there's actually two sections under the U.S. Code about people entering the United States. One are individuals who enter the United States who have never been deported before. The other code is relevant to people who have been deported before and they're trying to re-enter. So depending on how many times you've tried to re-enter and your criminal history, then typically they make a determination. It's called prosecutorial discretion, where they basically make a determination whether you should be prosecuted criminally or whether you should be put into the administrative proceedings. The reality of it is that in the history of this country, the discretion has always been that, unless you've illegally been deported and entered illegally in the past, typically there is no effort to try to criminally prosecute someone. You see what I mean? And so what happens is that basically what happens with prosecutorial discretion is, what we're talking about with Umar, is basically although it really isn't a legal analysis. The prosecutors have not been doing it because of humanitarian reasons, because these individuals are coming here trying to seek, whether it's asylum or whatever they're trying to seek, which is a legal way of trying to enter the country at the borders. That's nothing new when people come to the borders. As a matter of fact, that's how most of all of our ancestors came into this country, with the exception of those who came obviously involuntary during slavery. But from that point on, most people who come to this country outside of involuntary servitude came with the purpose of trying to seek a better life. And so the motive is speculative. However, it's clear that basically it's inhumane, because especially when you're talking about individuals coming into the country, generally the concern has always been the safety of the community. So, obviously those who have illegally re-entered typically have some sort of criminal background that would cause a prosecutor to prosecute. However, here, these individuals have no criminal history. They're just, a woman coming across the country with her child. It's like, I'm going to snatch her up and I'm going to put her in jail and prosecute her criminally, and then take her child and put the child somewhere. It's just inhumane. I don't know what the motive could be, because, to be quite honest with you, my mind can't go that way diabolically. So I really don't know what really is going on, to be quite honest with you, because there is no real legal basis for it, because they've never done it before. So today you're going to decide that you're going to implement a policy that's going to prosecute every individual who is trying to come into this country and separate them from their children. I have no idea what they're thinking about, to be honest with you.
That was a good question that you asked. What is the real reason behind it? And I always look for the dancing bear. When you have a lot of activity in front, there's something in the back that's moving in the background that you don't notice. But I'm really looking for that dancing bear that's dancing in the background, because what they're using is a distorted sense of the truth. They're trying to give you what they feel is truth, but it's mainly distorted to support their agenda, or whoever's agenda, to possibly, I don't know, maybe if it's correct, to build this so-called wall.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? To get funds for this wall. So by telling a distorted sense of the truth, use a small percentage of truth and blow it up to be real big, to create more psychogenetic fear into the people, then they will get the moral support to get funds for this wall. Just like when they said that Muslims are terrorists, when in fact Muslims do not cause any violence more than, as you see right now, you have the white supremacists at the top of the list, and this is what's perpetuating violence in America. So they created this label called BIE, Black Identity Extremists, which is a false label. So they use a small percentage to distort the truth to get more support. So that's what they're trying to do with this separating the kids, which is, like you said, diabolical.
Right. And what you said, I mean, one of the things, and I'll ask you the same thing, Doc. But one of the things that I think you just hit the nail right on the head. Is, you know, they're using it as a way of getting what they want. I mean, you are right. I mean, there's no question about it, because now he's using that inhumane act to try to see if they can get someone to bend and possibly get more money to build this so-called wall. And what's interesting is this. This is what I think, at least in my mind. I believe that they've created this false narrative, and I think you did a great job of describing the fact that there is no reason for anybody to feel threatened or anybody to feel fearful. However, they've created this narrative in order to, I mean, fear is the greatest way of motivating and getting the things that you want, and they've created this fear, and in order to appeal to his base, he does certain things in order to appeal to the base, that being the fact that these people do feel fearful and threatened by the immigrant population. It's false, and it's really ignorant, but there are people who really feel that way. And you're right that he's using that fear in order to get the things that he wants.
Basic business tactics.
Right.
The way he do business.
Exactly.
So like this false narrative, as you see, this false narrative is motivating a woman to call the police on people who's barbecuing at the park. Right. This false narrative is motivating probably some good citizens, but they so scared that they trying to harass gardeners in their mom.
Right.
And stop people from in their neighborhood. So once we start educating the people about what's the real social awareness in this country, because that false narrative is a form of negative propaganda, which can be labeled as some type of education.
Right.
But we have to start owning the real education, the real narrative, so we can inspire these same people to do the right thing when they come across these situations, and stop calling the police and feeling a petty sense of empowerment.
Right. That's right. Done.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Umar. How you doing, Brother Bashir?
Sure.
You guys are so much on point on so many things. Let me just try to tear down and backtrack a little bit. First of all, I think it's much more simplistic than we want to realize. There's self-interests that are on board here, and I think it was articulated extremely well by both of you, by all three of you. But let's look at what is actually going on. Trump wants to make sure that he maintains a voting bloc which is going to keep him, and this is the key word, in a position of power. This whole thing is predicated around power. If you tear down the dynamics, first of all, understanding that worldwide we have a massive immigrant exodus out of countries that have been devastated because of war. They have been devastated because of the inability of economic regeneration, etc. So here in America, you know, when you talk about letting somebody in a country, it's because they're usually an asset to that country. You don't let them in if you think they're a liability. That's why they go through a screening process at the border, et cetera. It has obviously been proven that the immigrant population, not just the Latino immigrant population, but every immigrant population have served this country for the constructive betterment So the rationale to keep these people out because they're a liability, first of all, doesn't hold water. Secondly, if they were truly trying to make sure the immigrants did not infuse themselves in this country, why would they not go to the financial sustainers who allow the immigrant population to flourish and stabilize themselves here? We're talking about the major corporations, the major private sources that have used the immigrant population for decades in this country to do the work of the country. So many corporations and so many cities have built their whole nexus, their financial nexus, on the immigrant population. And if you look up north, all through the regions, the wine regions, Tulare, et cetera, which are the vegetable regions, California is one of the highest income of California is agriculture. And that is dominated by the immigrant population. So when you stop and look at and start analyzing things from a scientific program, you see that that is not the case. Now, when you talk about the separation of the families, what's happening here, and it was articulated again so well, we're talking about a fear narrative. If I can instill the fear in you that your child will be taken if you cross that border, you're going to stay. But then the failed understanding is this. Look, I've been to the prisons of El Salvador, Honduras, etc. I know the dynamics that are going on in those countries and why people are running away. And when you think about it, in that whole Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador region, that whole process was started here in America because of the deportation that Ronald Reagan originally implemented. Then they put in place Montesutro, the heavy hand process. They sent the deportees back to El Salvador. They took the gang culture back there with them, set up house in El Salvador because it was unchecked. The American government did not help El Salvador when that happened, and then they started coming back over here, and then they were deported one more time back to El Salvador, and then that's where we have the killing fields. So we have to historically look at the dynamics of what is actually going on here. And I think to sum all this up, when we look at the immigrants coming over there, we're talking about shared experiences. We're talking about individuals that have been traumatized, that have been put under suppression, and they're coming over here still under an oppressive, suppressive regime. At the end of the day, if you want real solutions to the perspective, you don't drive the people underground that can pinpoint who the real adversaries are. You want some type of community engagement with them. That would come through some form of community policing, etc. So when you don't have that, your whole narrative of what you're saying that this whole context is standing on is totally erroneous. It's totally misguided, and anybody looking with any clear eyes can see that.
Mm-hmm. I stand behind you.
Back at you, sir.
Yeah.
Right.
And looking at what you were just saying not too long ago, Brother Umar, was the fact where you saying you got to look at the bigger picture. You got to look at what's going on in the background. And I think they did create a lot of laws and a lot of things, where they came up with they created laws when they said, okay, we're going to have all these drugs coming over here.
Yes.
Or we're going to have, this MS-13 coming over here. We're going to have the terrorists coming over here. So it was always something that they had to do in order to bring about this or create that fear, amongst the society in order for them to pass these different bills. They did it with the 3 strikes law, so it's always, there's always something, like I said, there's always a ulterior motive behind, something going along, so, yeah.
Yeah. And I know that we recently had the Supreme Court decision, the 5-4 decision on the President Trump's travel ban. Mm-hmm. And basically the ruling, of course, was the holding basically said that the that the ban did not exceed the president's authority under the Immigration and Nationality Act, and does not violate the Establishment Clause, which means that the government is not supposed to be engaged in religious proclamation or religious support or prohibition. And so basically what happened is that basically there was there was an organization out of Hawaii, the Muslim Association of Hawaii, that basically filed an action in federal court, in U.S. District Court, and it went to the Ninth Circuit and made its way up into the U.S. Supreme Court. And the problem, and what's really dangerous about the decision that was really made, is that although they call it the Muslim travel ban, the analysis of the court does not necessarily, really, that's not really what it's supposed to be. In other words, they did not prohibit it because they said, based upon the fact that it didn't violate the Establishment Clause, and that basically that it didn't exceed the president's authority under the Immigration and Nationality Act. And regardless, and clearly it was almost strictly across party lines, with the exception, I think, that maybe Justice Kennedy's decision in the case, and unfortunately I believe he's getting ready to retire, announced his retirement. But I mean, again, it's one of those things. It's kind of like a pseudo non-Muslim ban. However, I think in all reality, when you're talking about every country that is included in this proclamation, and I think it was Presidential Proclamation 9465 about the vetting process, every one of those countries clearly is a Muslim country. So, I think there's kind of like a way of hiding what's going on here, and I think it kind of goes part and parcel with what we're talking about, what's going on at the border.
All fear.
I'm sorry?
It's all fear.
Yeah. It's
Because
all
when Americans find out that they cannot travel to their favorite vacation spots, they're gonna be upset.
right.
And I think along the lines, it's probably going to end up backfiring because, it's just typical for other countries just to jump on bandwagon and just say, it's just typical for other countries to jump on bandwagon and say, well, okay, since you're not going to allow this to happen to come into your country, so we're not going to allow this to happen. So eventually, I think it's going to backfire.
Yeah.
Well, you're spot on. Look, our academic wealth, our strategic expertise doesn't come from our own country. We are so far behind in the educational standards worldwide. What you're going to have is people that have been a asset building up the infrastructure of this country are going to detour and go elsewhere. Most of them are coming to this country because of the economic means anyway. And so many of them, I don't have the exact percentage, but once they get the education from here, they turn right back and go to their countries. And I think you're going to see much more of that. And lastly on that, this whole travel ban and border thing, come on, this is not anything new. They did it with the Japanese in the internment camps. They did it with the Indians with the promised Christian schools that really changed their culture. They've been doing this for the history of this country. And lastly, with us as a people, they totally destroyed us through the crossing. So I think we need to look at history and really decide what type of action steps are we going to take. If we're looking for the federal government to change their dynamic or to change their scope of their heart, I think we're looking at an illusion. I think people of color, oppressed people that have worldwide banded together on other issues are going to have to band together on this issue too.
I also think, I'm sorry,
Go
brother.
ahead. No, go ahead, Brother Ali. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say is also what's interesting about the whole issue about the travel ban is, obviously they're saying that obviously they have to come with some sort of neutral basis for implementing the travel ban. And one of the arguments they were making as far as what the rational basis for it is that the court even came to the conclusion that the removal of 3 Muslim majority countries, being Iraq, Sudan, and Chad, from the list actually helped suggest that it was for a religious neutral basis. It wasn't based upon religion, it was a religious neutral basis, which I thought was really interesting. But really what boils down to the whole idea is that there is no basis for them to include any of these countries on the list to begin with, because I mean, and it's all political, because obviously you look at the names: Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. Right? And then you're going to take Sudan, Chad, and Iraq off the list. So I mean, when you talk about the issue of safety, and this is and it's sad, brother. It's really sad. Ignorance is a really sad thing. And the reason why I say that is because, if someone and I remember I was on a train not too long ago coming back from in Los Angeles, and I was talking to someone, and the whole idea, and there was just listening to this individual talk, they did not understand. It's almost like they do not understand, first of all, that Islam is a religion, that Muslims are people who worship certain things all over the country, whether you're talking about the United States and everywhere else. And this whole idea that they basically want to destroy America, and I've even heard people almost even go saying it's part of our doctrine to destroy America, or Muslims' doctrine to destroy America. I mean, to have someone that believes those sort of things it's almost like, how can you? It's unexplainable. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is that I'm just going to put that out there. If a billion people wanted to destroy you, a billion people would try to destroy you. You see what I'm saying? It's just like, I told the guy, and I shouldn't even say this on the radio, but I'm going to say it. I told the guy that, look, if I really wanted, it's like if I said I wanted to slap you right now, mm-hmm. right? I would just slap you, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? I mean, and it's kind of like there's, it doesn't even make any sense. I mean, you got a billion people in the world who the majority aren't doing anything, obviously, but being good citizens. And they've convinced these individuals that you've got this entire religion that wants to undermine the American way of life. And it absolutely makes no sense. You see what I mean? That's what, and when you look at the issue of safety and the fact that they're using a vetting process as an issue of safety, is that, there's Muslims in Europe, there's Muslims in Asia, there's Muslims all over the world.
Across the globe.
You see what I mean? So, I mean, it's just beyond me how, like you said, Brother Umar, it's kind of like, more or less kind of a political ploy than it is a legitimate way of trying to,
I want to challenge the men, African American leaders, Christians, everybody, to become to become better moral leaders in teaching people. There's a lack of education, as what Bashir said. There's a lack of education that's plagued the United States. And this lack of education has allowed for a false narrative of Islam to take over. This lack of education has forced a false narrative of the Native American. This lack of education has forced a plague of lies to be spread about Latinos. Mm-hmm. So it's time that that the men join our sisters on these front lines. Mm-hmm. And I know, and most men may take offense to this because the ones who are already on the front line, they holding it down. I can't lie, you know what I'm saying? Yes, but sir. Now we need the average. But now we need the average person to get with that community organizer who comes to you and asks, "Can I do a one-to-one with you?" As a board member for LA Voice and as a director for the ILM Foundation, community organizing is how we build power. Mm-hmm. This is how we build voices. And unfortunately, if we don't take this opportunity to step up, we're going to be gentrified out the process. Mm-hmm. And when I mean by gentrified out the process, all this progress that's going on is going on without us.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
sir.
And I refuse. I refuse to, at least because I've been told to save myself and my family from the hellfire. So I refuse to allow ourselves to be gentrified. So that's why I'm involved with teaching community accountability. It's easy to hold the other side and tell them, "Hey, y'all got to come help us." But now I want to get back into that mode where we get into self-determination. Yeah. And we get back into that mode of community accountability. So like last year, we taught maybe, facilitated rather, maybe 10 classes over at Stop the Violence, Increase the Peace Foundation on community accountability, and then we end up, and that led to an action to have a days of dialogue discussion with LAPD.
Right.
And here we had community members from our community who was engaged in interactive exercises to educate them on how to engage civic officers.
Right.
You know, because when we walked into this situation, we don't want them to get in there, don't want us to get in there and vent. It's not a time for venting. This is a time to rhetorically
That's right.
state your narrative. So LAPD sent us captains, chief, and commanders, and a police commissioner to discuss the future of community policing in South Los Angeles. So, and this goes across the board. So to teach community accountability is to educate our community not to be gentrified in this process of progress that is going on, especially in Compton, Los Angeles, Washington, Long Beach. So, you know, I'm just worried about Southern California. I can't hold up the world, but I would like other men who has expertise and certain skills and interests to join us, to join these community organizers, and let's establish a voice.
Absolutely.
You know,
Go ahead.
you know, one of the things also I think that we must do is that we have to let people know that they have to stop becoming so gullible. And when it comes to the media, when it comes to the news, you know, I think that, you know, we talked about it not too long ago with cinema and how it has a negative effect upon, you know, public opinion, how it has a tendency to sway public opinion. And I think one of the things that we do, we get so caught up with the media and the news that we become so gullible that we accept anything that is dished out. And I think that's where the fear comes in. If we want to put it out that, okay, we have terrorists coming in the country, and so we want to create this law to ban people coming in from Muslim countries. Okay, so let's say this. Let's say the great majority of the school shootings is white males between this age and that age, so we're not going to allow no males to go to school. You know, I mean, that's you know, when you look at it, that's what it looks ridiculous when you look at it like that. I mean, so one of the things that we have to do is we have to stop becoming so gullible. We got to stop, you know, letting this media sway us to think a certain way, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I know that one of the things that I want to talk about, and I'm glad that you brought up the issue of action, is that we're going to be, on the 28th of July, we're actually having this national conference in Los Angeles, by the way, brother, and I hope that you can actually come out. It's actually called Justice and Jury Reform Conference. And one of the things that I wanted to start, and we've been talking about a movement about jury reform across the country, where we're trying to get, and I'm of the opinion that if we begin to want to start dealing with the issues affecting our community, especially those with regards to law enforcement, is that one of the things that's happening, and I've seen myself as an attorney and those who have been involved in the criminal justice system, is that basically it's juries who make the decision. And far too often the problem with the juries is that the juries are made up of individuals that do not look like the defendant. Exactly. I mean, I've been in trials, and I've said this before, I've been in trials in Compton, and there not be no black people on the jury. I've been in trials
in me off the jury.
Yeah.
So they kicked me out the jury selection.
Yeah, because
I remember that.
And this is the kind of the question, and even in Inglewood, that's happened. What they do is they, you know, there's ways, there's mechanism in order to challenge the people on the jury, but what they do is they ask the magic question. They ask the question like, has anybody ever had a negative experience with the police department? Or do you know anybody that had a negative experience with the police department? Obviously, different communities are going to answer that question a different way. So once you raise your hand and you say, I've had negative experience with police officers, then they end up kicking the black people off the jury, and you challenge them. They're going to say, well, it was race neutral because they had negative experience with police officers. And, you know, we have to get beyond it. I'm telling you, we're not going to be, even police officers who are being charged with killing people in our communities are not being having jurors from the communities that they work in on the jury pool. And we're curious as to why they end up with not guilty verdicts. We're crying, we're outraged. But until we should be represented on all these jury pools, whether it's
Yes,
our
sir.
people in our communities
sir.
or whether it's police officers who are policing in our communities. We have to be involved in that. And as I said, I mean, trust me, black people will prosecute a black man who's create chaos in their communities. But we do need to make sure that we have individuals that are going to look at the evidence and look at it in a manner that is going to be fair and impartial. And if we don't get there, if we don't start putting African Americans and people across section of the community on these jury pools, we're going to have a problem. Nothing will ever change. You can change laws however you want
That's
to,
right.
but the jury is the fact finder. And when we get on these juries, Umar, you know, a lot of us don't even want to be on the jury. We don't understand, and I'm begging this. You have some young man whose life is on the line, guilty or innocent, and most of the time, no matter how innocent you are, you know, the people on the jury have to be able to presume you to be an innocent man. And when you don't sometimes when you don't look like them, they don't give you that fair shake.
And that is very true. I just left San Jose, California, over at Stanford and Palo Alto University for the D School of Design. And I met so many people that are trying to help us or the urban community, African Americans, work on our own problems. But they face a resistance from our community because the apathy, as I mentioned earlier, and the self-helplessness that we're stuck in is blinding us from joining the process. Because there's a lot of resources out there, but when we got to start rebuilding trust, so when this white person walk up to us or this Asian person approaches us, hey, I got this resource that's going to help you or going to help us make the situation better, you know, because of the oppressive state of the system's been on our backs for so long, we don't trust anything that comes our way. And going back to the education piece, yes, you're going to have gullible people as long as we're not educating. For those who have the knowledge of the education, it's a responsibility for us
Yes, it is.
not preach, but
Yes,
teach.
it is.
Right.
Teach people or teach those who are willing to learn what we know.
Right.
What we know. So when this help comes to you, you can recognize it.
Right.
You can recognize it because community accountability is so important because we cause so much of our own problems that, you know, it's hard to tell somebody, you know, stop shooting when we shooting ourselves. So we got to begin to start loving ourselves so our kids won't be the one on the news, or so our kids could basically get off the news and, you know, and start joining the system in a more positive manner, because I really believe wherever there's poverty at, you're going to have people stepping up to aid. But if you don't know what that aid looks like, you're going to refute it because it's coming in the form of something that you distrust.
Right. That's true. That's true. That's so true. I mean, we do that, and we do need more teachers in the community, and to impart the proper knowledge to, you know, because I mean, basically, you know, reality is so subjective, and sometimes when you come into the communities and you're trying to give them some sort of positive, and actually what we always say, real talk, you know, their reality is so different, and not necessarily the reality is not necessarily real reality, if that makes any sense. You know, it's kind of like it's skewed by their circumstances.
Yes.
And when you're going into the community, especially when you take, you know, mentoring young men and trying to, you know, speaking with these young men and seeing, you know, what their possibilities are. For some people, man, I mean, they don't even think certain things are possible. And you're right. I mean, when you come to them with, you know, whether it's, you know, people in our community, outside our community, they don't know how to respond to it because they're not been exposed to many different things, you know. So that's important. And I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, because that is a difference between preaching and teaching, bro.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's like a lot of you like Zulu and Bashir. Y'all been standing mentors in my life, and I could really watch you from afar. So, but I can only recognize that because of some of the principles that I have embraced that you have taught.
Yes,
You know
sir.
what I'm saying? So, but at the same time, we need more men out here, my dude.
Yes, sir.
Need more men out here, and I'm gonna make this plea. I don't know if it's a right or wrong plea. Why? Let your husband out the house, please. Let that man out the house to come out here and do this work
Right.
because we need him.
Yeah.
We need them. We need them, and we don't need them to stay out all night, but we just need them to show up for these actions so you can have this thing called presence. And when
Well
they see
said.
presence, and when they see this thing called presence, that they know that presence is their constituency, who are eligible voters. You know what I'm saying? And that they have and that their vote is attached to a narrative, which is our voice. So,
Right.
it's very important that we start teaching more, and more men start
Okay.
accompanying these sisters who are on the front line, because we got to stand around to protect the scene.
Well, I appreciate that, brother, man. I so
Well
much
said.
appreciate you coming with us today, man, and joining us, man, and lacing us with that knowledge.
Thank you.
And so and hopefully we can have you back again to speak
Anytime.
with us again. Thank you very
Stay up,
much.
Omar.
And for
All right,
everybody
have a
else
good day.
listening in, we'll see you next week, same time, same channel. Until next week, stay blessed.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.